several other churches wrote to OMPs yesterday, airing some concerns. Just walk me through what the main concerns are for you.
While we believe in the democratic process, the best decisions are doing the right thing for the right reason. And we've got concerns that maybe we're not doing the right thing and not doing it for the right reason. Last night I listened to a little bit of the debate that was featured on TV, and there were all sorts of stories that were nothing short of horror stories, or what can go wrong. But my experience of being a priest for nearly 40 years is very different, because it's what can go right when we invest in a good care of the dying. So our concerns are that we're not actually addressing the difficulties, we're trying to provide a solution to what seems to be a problem. And I don't think the bill actually addresses that.
Right, so if I'm kind of reading between the lines here, we already have palliative care. Do you think that needs to be improved?
Well, we do have some palliative care, but the short answer is yes. Because we believe, and I've experienced it in my own life with my own mother, it can be done beautifully and wonderfully, with great compassion and care for the human being, and with great dignity. And part of the position we have is that we always believe in the dignity of each human being. And life is a gift. And, just as a little baby, they can't respond to us, they can goo and gar, but we have ultimate love for children because they are so vulnerable. Why not apply that same principle to the end of life, when people are also very vulnerable? So I think we really need to boost good palliative care, because it can make a difference. It can achieve a high level of pain and reduction. I think there's a lovely debate about this question, because it actually makes us confront death, which is not a topic we talk about. It's one of the great taboos these days. Years ago it was sex and all sorts of things, but now the big taboo is death. What actually this is facing is us facing up to that question. And you know what? I think there's a lot of fear there, because it's an unknown thing. And when we don't know something, we tend to put it out of our sight, or try for quick kind of solutions. So there is a different view of life and what it means and how precious it is that we're coming from. We want to engage with people. We want to be part of the parliamentary and democratic process, but let's make sure we're looking at everything and not just simple solutions to maybe the problems that are not there. And if we do enact this bill without provision for making a huge commitment to palliative care, and we have Calvary Hospital, who is already doing this wonderful gift. In my own case, we were able to do that with my mother at home, which was the place that she'd lived for nearly 60 years. And it was the place where she felt safe and at home. And we had great cooperation with doctors and nurses and all that kind of thing as well. But it can be done beautifully and with dignity and great compassion.
All right, and obviously your preference would be that the bill does not pass. Is that
correct?
Yes. Should it pass, and it looks like the numbers are in favour of it, are there any particular amendments that you would particularly like to see made to it?
Well, again, often the bill is termed voluntary. We would like to think that there would be an opportunity for our healthcare sector, to which we are very committed and are often leaders in these areas, that they wouldn't be forced into doing something that is beyond their whole mission and vision of the human being. So we would look for some sort of, not exceptionalism, but to recognise that if this is voluntary, that means then people can choose what we would call a safe place to go to where this is not envisaged. So that enshrining that in some way, but also to make sure that definitions are not too broad. And second, it would be all about beefing up good quality palliative care because it can work. It's very good at pain relief. It's very good at assisting people who are fearful. And I think that's what good palliative care does. No one has actually experienced what death is. So it's an unknown thing. So we're trying to deal with all sorts of things. Perhaps people have unresolved issues in life, and COVID's put it in us a place where, people can't actually get together to be together. One of the beautiful things I experienced was a wonderful quality time with my dear mother, for example, that I would never have had necessarily, but it was a beautiful time, and properly saying goodbye, and at the same time accompanying on that journey. They weren't alone. And I guess that's basically what people fear too, that they fear being alone, they fear the unknown, but this is great reassurance. So it's not just the medical care, it's this whole notion of accompaniment. We're not facing this alone, nor are we a burden. Because sort of in the back of people's minds a little bit too, that they think, oh, I'm a burden, I'm not useful. Well, neither's a baby useful. That doesn't depend on, our worth doesn't depend on what we do, it's who we are. And sort of reinforcing those. So enshrining some of those concepts into amendments, should the bill pass, would be vital to me, because it says, what kind of society do we want? And we want a society that is happy, healthy, but we've got to recognise that people get sick, that people are in pain, and yet, like if you break your leg, we can see that in 6 weeks' time, it'll get better. There's some things we can't fix, and that's always a challenge to our medical people, because they come from the point of view of saying, do no harm. Their first instance is to heal, to bring life to its fullness. And I think all of those things, and I've had discussions with some of our medical people who are rather conflicted on some of these things, because their intuition is to strive to do the best. Now, do we want to promote life at all costs? No. We only want to use ordinary means to make sure people have that dignity and they don't feel that they are a burden, and that compassion is the name of the game.
How many people who come to a Catholic church express their concerns about this bill to you?
Well, I'm, in my role as the Archbishop, I'm not in one particular parish, but I get to go to, we've got 60, and so I get to go into very different places. People are a little bit concerned about, because they're fearful of the question, they're not quite sure what it means. So it's a bit confronting when you start talking about death, because it's very personal and we don't know that there. But they also know our great tradition of wanting to care for the sick and the dying. They're not to be discarded. They actually have a deeper claim on us. So while they mightn't be able to use the words, that desire is there. And so there is great concern amongst people about this. Now, my challenge is to get people to think about some of the deeper issues and not say yes or no. Or if we're going to say no for this, it doesn't mean we're against life. In fact, we want to embellish life. We want to make sure that people have a great dignity in life. And if we are to reject something, then what are the reasons, or what's the thinking behind it? Because sometimes there is a lot of emotion in this issue, and that's okay because we're dealing with people's lives. But there's ways of attending to that emotion by providing good care. But what are the deeper issues? And sometimes you don't quite get to those. And people mightn't have the language, or they mightn't have the thing, but they know there's something inherently difficult about this direction in which we're going. What kind of society do we want to live in? And that's part of their question. And we would always say, choose life with a big L, because that's God's plan, that's part of the reason we're here. And also, you know, we actually believe there's another life to come. That's a continuity of this. So we've got a little saying in one of our prayers that life is changed, not ended at death. And I think that's what we call the gift of hope. Hope is not optimism saying, oh look, hope it doesn't rain today. We're just optimistic it won't rain today. But hope is founded in certainty in our relationship with God. So the people I talk to have that relationship with a God who has called them into this life and wants them to live with him forever.
This is the 17th attempt to legalise voluntary euthanasia in South Australia. If it doesn't pass this time, there'll undoubtedly be another attempt and another attempt after that. That doesn't make you think now's the time to pass this bill?
Not necessarily, no. There seems to be a current around Australia. Well, we've got to get this done. Well, what's the rush? Let's think about the issues. Think about the consequences of those issues. Perhaps there is an inevitability. I mean, I was in Victoria before I came here, and the sad thing was there wasn't a lot of thought or debate in Victoria at that time. Did it really get people to think about what was happening? Not necessarily. If each attempt tries to get people to think about, what kind of a society do we actually want? Rather than say, oh, we've got to do this because everyone else is doing it. That's never a good reason. But if it's about choosing, and that's part of the beauty about democratic process, it's actually questions about what kind of a society do we want to live in. But that's at a deeper level. And if that's part of the debate, it's not just trying to get it off the agenda before the election or whatever it might be. It's actually, thinking now, well, okay, if we do this, what follows from that? Or are we actually going about it the wrong way? Were we to invest heavily in palliative care, would demands for such as this actually be lessened because we're providing a sense of surety into people's fear of the unknown and their feeling of being alone? I don't think there's an inevitability about it. Sure, it's going to keep coming up as other things have, but should that be the end of it? One of the difficulties about this in other parts of the world, not Australia yet, is that where that goes. This is the beginning of a long game. Now, do we want to embark on that road? We've got to be careful and mindful of the consequences of what we think about.
Do you think it could be a slippery slope if we do pass this?
Well, I know some people use that, but what are the consequences of that? And again, it's a different understanding of the human being. If people are only human beings if they are useful, and then they don't become useful, then we can sort of disregard them. But we don't believe in human beings like that. Do we always get it right? No. But that doesn't stop us from having this essential understanding and with a compassionate face. Here, life thrives, even if it is diminished. And it's not at all costs understanding, but it's going gently into the night.
So June 9 is the date that it looks like it's set to go to a final vote. What's your simple message to MPs ahead of that day?
Think about the deeper issues and think about providing good alternatives. And the simplest one is really investing deeply in palliative care and letting people know that this is a vital opportunity and a process of handling a most difficult time in anyone's life. I mean, this is not an easy thing for anyone to do, to face the end of their life. But knowing that they have alternatives know that they have choices, and like some of the people I've listened to, it seems that they want to disregard sort of even palliative care as an option. Maybe that's because it's not there. Maybe because they haven't explored what that means, or maybe it's coming from a deep place of fear in their own life, which is, and that's very real at that time, but offering some sense of reassurance to say, look, okay, we can get through this together. We can help you retain your dignity. We can allow you, as pain-free as possible, to graciously come to the end of your natural life, and if you have faith, then that's an entry into the next phase of life, which we call eternal life.
Thank you very much, Archbishop.